Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another Webinar Wednesday. So, we got a good topic for you today. Usually, we're talking about everything about, hey, here's what a good wholesale deal looks like, or here's how you wholesale, here's how you talk to motivated sellers, here's how you work with your buyers. Today, I want to talk a little bit about what is not a wholesale deal. So, I think it's just as important. So, we're out there looking at properties that, that we're always looking for a deal. We always want that next deal coming in. And I think it's just as important to realize what's not a deal. So I know Ronnie brings it up all the time. He's doing a great job of talking about this, teaching this, but then also realizing it for himself as he's looking at all these deals every day of basically disqualifying as much as you are qualified. So figuring out what's not a deal versus what is a deal. So when you have all these leads that are coming in, looking at all this stuff like that, not every deal that you come across or not every lead you come across is a good wholesale deal. There's some that you need to be able to disqualify right away to save your time, to save your resources, to figure out what you can actually move on. Eliminating those 9 no's to get that 1 yes, I think is really important stuff. So Ronnie, first thing that comes to your mind when you're thinking about like, hey, just what's not a deal, what we need to talk about during this session here and stuff like that. What do you think of, man?
Man, first thing that comes to my mind is, kind of like you said, disqualify everybody. As much as, we are prepared to hear no, we also have to prepare the sellers like, hey, this is not going to work too. You also kind of have to know, like, what your buy box is, whether it is a certain zip code or how far it is from the area that you're, so that you're doing business in. If you live in Chicago, maybe they're, but you hear something out in Lansing, maybe you don't want to do that, or maybe you do, depending on what you have going on. And then also just, what type of property is it? Does it even make sense to do that? Yes, you can wholesale pretty much anything, but, you just have to figure out, what does it even make sense to do that? So some of that also too is just really, figuring out what's going on with the seller. Is there really motivation there? Is there pain, or are we just kind of kicking the tires because they liked your advertisement, whatever that is?
So no, that's exactly right. And what we really want to look at, we want to look at like 3 different things. We're talking about what's not a deal. So you're looking at like, does it fit your wheelhouse? Is it actually a property that should be wholesaled or retailed or anything like that? Or does that seller actually, are they motivated to sell? Or do they fit your kind of the buy box of like, or the sell box of really what they should be looking at? So those kind of 3 things. Is it what you should be looking at? Is it the right type of property? And is it the right type of seller? Those are the 3 things we want to talk about today. So let's just start with the kind of that since you brought it up big, does it fit in your wheelhouse? So know what you are able to do. Know what your capabilities are. Hey, if I just want to wholesale within Indianapolis, no, I don't need to look at something in Chicago or look at something 2 hours away. That's pulling resources out from what I really want to do. It takes time to drive down there, analyze the house, talk on the phone, have those conversations and things like that after a property that really doesn't really fit what I need. So you can talk about outside of the area, that's outside of your wheelhouse, but also too outside of your kind of what you're looking at price range. If you're used to, use Indianapolis here as an example, our bread and butter is like buying properties that are in between like $30,000 and $60,000. That's what we've made a living on in the last, 4 or 5 years. But we do some cookie cutters. We do some properties that are, $200,000, $300,000. We also do some properties that are like $10,000. So we have like quite a big scope, but also there's properties that fall in there that, no, should we buy, $1 million property in like one of the best areas? No, even though it needs a ton of work, even though it's a complete rehab job. Yes, great. But you know what? Maybe we don't speak that language as well as what we think we can, and we're not just chasing after that deal. And that's really what happens when you start getting outside of that wheelhouse, is that you end up chasing. You end up, using your energy, using your resources, using your time. You're chasing after that deal to make something work that maybe it doesn't quite fit into it. And maybe you miss out on some other deals that are sitting right inside of that are in your wheelhouse that you're spending other time on. So does it fit in your wheelhouse? Is it in your location? Is it in your area? Is it in your price range of what you really want to focus on? So Ronnie, what else do you have to say about just kind of making sure things fit into your wheelhouse or buy box or whatever you want to look at?
No, I mean, you hit the head right. You hit the head right on the nail, man. I mean, it's you want to know what you're doing. You want to know exactly how you're handling things, and you want to make sure that your numbers make sense. Brian brought up a great example. When we, as a company, went out and we bought a house in a neighborhood that we haven't really done. It was at a price point that, we thought made sense, but it was just too risky for us. But again, it had all the other telltale signs: a somewhat motivated seller, critical life event. There was some equity there, but does it really make sense to do this? And it wasn't really a wholesale deal. Like, we got out of it, thankfully, luckily. We got out of it by the skin of our teeth. But this one, probably shouldn't do that. So you want to make sure, again, that you're just staying true to what your rules are, and that way it's always safest that way.
So the next part is making sure that the property makes sense. Does it seem like a good wholesale deal? When we talk about like wholesale deals, we're talking about the stuff that, the property's in some kind of distress. The repairs can't be done. They can't keep up with them. It is a house problem. There's something going on. Part of your, responsibility as a wholesaler is to make sure that, that the seller is taken care of, not necessarily taken advantage of, and, things like that. Making sure their house fits in the right criteria. We have no problem. We're pretty comfortable with who we are in our skin. We're pretty transparent of saying, listen, you probably shouldn't sell this house to me. You should probably go ahead and list it. You know what? And they're like, no, I don't want to list it. I can't. I need it right now. That's awesome. That fits right in that criteria what we're going to talk about next. They're a motivated seller. So even though the house doesn't make sense for a wholesale deal, the seller does. And we'll talk about that here in a second. So make sure the house makes sense of something that does work for a wholesale deal. All the times in all these different Facebook groups and stuff like that, kind of what we're in, we see a lot of people like posting properties just to like post a property. Like just that's a listing. Like, I don't want you don't need to post this on an investor page when it's already a listing number one, or you just flipped it. You're not going to sell it to an investor that way if it's already a flipped property. So kind of knowing kind of what it is, what makes sense with that the property is in some kind of a distress level. There's some repairs that need to be done. There's some things that need to happen to the property. There can be a place where we can value add. And that's what we say when we're talking to those sellers, and they're like, when we have no problem saying like, hey, listen, this is not the right property for me. This is in great shape. You go ahead and list it if you want to. I'm not going to be able to give you the price that you need, because what I'm looking to do is I'm looking for properties that I can add value to. That's what I need. That's what I'm looking for. So making sure that things fit inside that buy box of the right property is one of the best things to go. So Ronnie, when you're out there going out and you're looking at these properties and you're talking to those sellers, and you come across those properties, are like, man, this is pretty nice. Like, I could move my family in here tomorrow, or there's just a few repairs that really need to be done. How do you go about having those conversations, and kind of how that goes with the seller?
Yeah, that happened. Actually last week. I went out and took a look at a property. Nice 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. Comps around 240. Look pretty nice. And but they didn't give me all that information up front. They were really holding everything. So when I got there, I'm listening to them. Like I said, look, this is not a bad property. I'm not sure that I am your best option for this. Again, asking the question, what would make you maybe want to go this route as opposed to going the traditional route? And then I shut up and listen, to kind of see what's going on. And so then that's when the onions start peeling back, because I'm just looking at the property doesn't make sense to necessarily do that. But then when I ask that what question, then we hear, oh, divorce. Then we hear, I don't like her. Then we hear, like the kids only here till school is out. But once school is out, I'm ready to sell this thing right now if you give me the price that makes sense. So again, disqualifying, pushing them away, like, no, this don't work. But then you'll kind of see them kind of come back to the table. But then on the other side, I had a conversation with a guy near the kind of the Speedway area. He's telling me all of the updates and upgrades and new flooring he put in and air conditioning. I'm like, okay, yeah, you definitely want to make sure that you list this property with everything that you put in. But he kept begging me to come and look at this house. And it was the most confusing thing in the world. But I went against my gut. I went and took a look at it. When I walked in the house, I was like, oh, wait, nothing's done here. All of the flooring checked up, everything there, because sometimes sellers don't necessarily tell the truth. So you kind of have to, just be wise about that. But again, just kind of look at the property, have the conversations with them, and be okay with, giving them the truth. That's okay to give them the truth. If you give them the truth, they'll trust you.
Yeah. And I think it all plays into too, when you set it up like, hey, sir, I don't think you want me to buy your property. I don't think you even want me to give an offer because it sounds like from what you're saying, your house is in really good shape. When they keep pushing, they're trying to like sell to you. That's a good position to be in as a wholesaler. And that's where you want to be as a cash buyer, just somebody looking to get under contract and stuff like that. Because then when you do give that low offer, and if they get offended by it, or that's super low, like, I told you, you don't want me to buy your house. Like, it doesn't make sense for me. So knowing that houses fit into that right criteria is definitely important. Then the last piece. So, we've talked about basically that things are in your wheelhouse. You know what you're doing. You're able to hit your criteria, stuff like that. It's the right kind of property that makes sense for a wholesale deal. Then the last piece is that it's the right seller. So same thing. Just when we went back to the house of, like, the house needs to be in some kind of distress situation, the seller needs to be in some kind of distress situation. And that's not like a negative thing. Like, people need help. I've sat across from the closing table so many times where people that we bought houses from, that you look at, like, why would they sell you this house at this price? So, like, because they needed to. They're sitting there with tears in their eyes and just so thankful and things. That happens each and every day. And that's what we're doing, is being able to help people out of these situations, out of these problems. And really what it comes down to is that they are in some kind of distress situation. And it's kind of funny of, like, I feel like I can make a list of all the things, with a divorce and loss of a family member and all these things that you kind of think of. All of a sudden next week, there's going to be something new that I have not come across, where there's like, oh wow, I've never heard of that situation. It's a heavy conversation, and something pops up. There are people who go through a lot of different stuff, but making sure that person basically makes sense, that they are motivated, that they're in some kind of distress situation, that they need to sell their home to you at a certain time because they can't do this, can't do that, whatever it may be. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for that person that has that pain point. That's that motivated seller. That's what you're looking for. Not every house is in your wheelhouse. Not every house is the right property for you to wholesale. Not every seller is the right person you to wholesale from. And I know, Ronnie, you talk to way more sellers than I do each and every day. You're talking to, multiple ones and things. And when you have those conversations, I'm just like kind of getting that point of, like, hey, like same thing with the house of, like, hey, I don't think I'm the root for you. I think you're better off in giving people the different situations, and even kind of talking through those. And like John Martinez calls it the deal killers. Going through those of, like, hey, have you explored this with this? Have you done this? Have you, talk to them about those pain points, and putting all those, like, things out that might kill a deal for you, putting it out in front just to get their honest opinion on stuff like that. When they start answering yes to those, be like, yeah, exactly. I'm not the person for you. You should do this.
Without a doubt, man. Again, just even trying to make sure that we're the right fit.
Yeah.
On a connectivity basis, or just trying to mirror them, to make sure that we're sensing, some type of pain or some type of distress, some type of motivation that makes sense for them to want to work with us. If those things aren't there, hey, God bless you, God keep you. We'll see you later. And I remember actually talking through a recent situation when our other acquisition manager, James, he said when the seller pulled up, the seller had, nice gators, a big old suburban SUV, and didn't look like he was in that much stress and didn't need it. But, as we were beginning to talking with him, there was some situations going on. And James was able to educate that seller of what was going on in that situation and build that rapport with them, which made him the right person based on the rapport there. And we were able to go ahead and get that contract, based on that. But again, you want to continue to, know what you want, know what makes sense for you, own that, and be okay with that. And then again, as you're framing these conversations, talking with these sellers, giving them expectations like, hey, I'm going to give you permission to say no, but making sure that I also too have permission to tell you, hey, if something doesn't fit, something doesn't, and it's okay. So then, because again, I don't want your feelings to be hurt. So make sure that we're all, using the right, using each other's time wisely and correctly. And I say yesterday, I got a phone conversation from a guy. He was ready to sell, seemed motivated, but then he cut me off. He said, hey, I'm a straight shooter. My house is not in Indianapolis. My house is, up an hour past Kokomo. Can you still buy my house? And I said, I appreciate that. I was able to say, you know what, sir, yes, I could take a look at it, but it's not going to do too much. Your best bet is to talk with a realtor in your area, because your area is a lot more remote and you want to deal with someone that is more specialized in that area. And he said, you know what, Ronnie, you didn't mention that in your ad, but thank you for at least telling me. And so so now with the training and just, qualifying more and knowing what it is that I'm looking for, and being able to communicate that more and getting everyone on the same page, I'm able to get more no's and they're not be nasty, and that makes the experience for you better, not to get nasty no's.
So awesome stuff. So that's what it's all about, knowing what is a good deal for you, knowing what's a good deal for you, a good wholesale deal, but then also knowing what is not a good deal or a good wholesale deal. So does it not fit in my wheelhouse? Is it not the right type of property? Is it not the right type of seller? Knowing those things can help you out a lot by disqualifying some properties so you can focus on the ones that do qualify and get to that deal. So thanks a lot for today. This is another webinar Wednesday. Hit us up at any time you have any questions, need anything from us. We'd love to help you out. Ronnie at simplewholesaling.com, Brian at simplewholesaling.com, Randy at simplewholesaling.com. You reach out to him as well. We will see you guys next week on another webinar Wednesday. Take care.